turning the old cabin and broken fence into shapes that looked like ghosts of what once was. The mountains behind her stood silent and cold, like they already knew what was coming. She wiped her hands on her worn dress and stepped out onto the porch. The wind stirred her dark hair, carrying the smell of pine and early frost. Inside the cabin, her mother lay coughing, weak and fading more every day. Her little brother Tom was somewhere behind her, trying hard to be brave, even though he was just a child. Their lives were falling apart one piece at a time, and Sarah was the only one still trying to hold everything together. The wagon rolled to a stop, pulled by two strong horses. On it sat Martha Brennan, a woman Sarah had not seen in years but remembered well. Martha stepped down with quiet dignity, her dark coat brushing the dust from the ground. Her eyes softened when she looked at Sarah. "Hello, dear," Martha said gently. "May I come in?" Quote. Sarah nodded, even though she felt a storm rising inside her. She led Martha into the cabin. The moment Martha saw her mother lying on the cot, she hurried to her side, kneeling beside her, as if they were old friends reunited at last. Elizabeth. Martha whispered, "I came as soon as I received your letter." Sarah froze. Letter? Her mother had barely had the strength to speak for weeks. How had she found the strength to write letters? Sarah's heart pounded. Mother. What letter? Her mother looked at her with tired, guilty eyes. Tears glimmered in the corners. "Forgive me, Sarah," she whispered. "I had to." Before Sarah could ask anything more, Martha stood and turned toward her. Sarah saw something in the woman's face. Something serious, heavy, and not at all comforting. Sarah. Martha began softly. "Your mother told me everything. About her sickness. About the hunger. About your debts. About the trader refusing you more credit. And about your father being gone." Each word cut deeper into Sarah's chest. She swallowed hard. "We're managing," Sarah said quietly, though the lie tasted bitter. "We always find a way." Martha shook her head. "Not this time, child. Your mother needs medicine. Real medicine. And your brother needs a safe place. Food. School." A future Sarah felt the ground shift under her feet. "What are you saying?" Martha reached into her bag and pulled out a folded paper. Her expression changed, becoming a mix of sadness and duty. "I am here because your mother asked for help," Martha said, "and I am prepared to give it. All the treatment your mother needs, a good school for Tom, enough money to keep both of them safe." Sarah's breath caught. "Why would you do that for us?" Martha took a slow breath. "Because my nephew, Caleb Brennan, needs a wife." The room went silent. Sarah felt like the air had vanished. Her mother began to cry softly. "No." Sarah whispered, "Mother, no. Tell me you didn't." Her mother's weak voice trembled. "I had no choice, Sarah. I couldn't let you die here. I couldn't let Tom grow up alone. You're all I have. I had to do something." Sarah stepped back until she hit the wall. Her hands shook. She felt trapped, cornered by love and desperation. "Caleb was injured 2 years ago," Martha continued. "A grizzly attacked him in the high country. He survived, but his legs were badly damaged. He walks with a cane now. He's alone, angry, and shutting himself away on the ranch. The family is worried." "And you want me to marry him?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely there. "He agreed to the arrangement," Martha said. "But only if you agree too." Sarah's knees nearly buckled. "I don't know him. I don't love him." Her mother let out a broken sob. "Love won't keep you alive, child. Food will. Safety will. Please, Sarah, please forgive me. I did it to save you." Sarah looked at Tom, who had quietly stepped into the room. His young face was pale, afraid. He looked at her like she was the only solid thing left in his world. "Sis," he whispered, "are we going to be okay?" Sarah felt her heart crack straight down the middle. She looked at her mother, at Tom, at the cold, empty cabin that had once been home. She thought of the winter coming fast. She thought of the hunger, the sickness, the endless struggle. Then she thought of a man she'd never met. A broken mountain man waiting somewhere beyond the peaks. She didn't want this life. She didn't want to be sold. But she couldn't walk away, not when her family's lives hung in the balance. Her voice came out thin and hollow. "When do I leave?" Martha's relief was visible, though she kept her composure. "The wagon will return for you in 1 week," she said. "The wedding will take place at the ranch." Sarah nodded, but inside, something was crumbling. She had just traded her freedom for her family's survival. And yet, deep inside, a whisper of fear echoed through her chest. What kind of man waited for her in those mountains? A stranger, a crippled legend, a recluse, and soon her husband. Sarah spent the week preparing to leave the only home she had ever known, though it felt less like preparing and more like breaking apart piece by piece. Every morning she woke with a cold knot in her stomach, and every night she lay awake staring into the shadows of the cabin, wondering who she would become once she crossed the mountains. Her mother grew a little stronger each day thanks to the medicines Martha had sent, but her improving health didn't erase the pain in Sarah's chest. Tom stayed close to her the entire week. He followed her as she fetched water, helped her gather her few belongings, and sat beside her at the fire even when his eyes grew heavy with sleep. He didn't talk much. He didn't need to. His silence spoke enough. He was afraid of losing the only person who had kept their little family from falling apart. On the final morning, frost coated the ground. The breath of the mountains felt colder, sharper. The wagon rolled up the trail just after sunrise. Sarah's heart thudded when she saw Jacob, the quiet older driver, step down to greet her. He tipped his hat respectfully. "Morning, Miss Sarah. You ready? Number." She would never be ready. But she nodded. She hugged her mother carefully, afraid her mother would break apart if she squeezed too tight. Elizabeth held her daughter with trembling hands. "Sarah," her mother whispered, "I know you feel I betrayed you, but one day you'll see that I was only trying to save you." Sarah wanted to be angry. She wanted to scream. But when she looked at her mother's tired face, she only felt sadness. She pressed a kiss to her mother's forehead. "Take care of yourself," she whispered. Then came Tom. He rushed at her with tears in his eyes, burying his face in her waist. "Don't go," he choked out. "Please don't go, Sarah." Her throat burned. She knelt and cupped his face. "I have to," she said softly. "For you, for Ma. This way, you can have a future. This way, you won't grow up hungry or alone." "I don't want a future without you," he cried. Sarah's heart cracked. She hugged him tight. "You'll see me again," she promised. "All right. And when school lets you, you can visit me. I'll be waiting." Tom nodded, even though he looked too young to carry such fear. Sarah climbed into the wagon, clutching the small bundle of her belongings. The horses began to move. Tom ran after the wagon until the ground became too uneven, then stood there crying, waving at her, until he disappeared behind the trees. It was the hardest moment of her life. The journey to the Brennan Ranch took all day. The trail wound higher into the mountains, through thick pine forests and rocky passes where the air grew colder and thinner. Sarah wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, but the chill she felt had nothing to do with the wind. She kept wondering what kind of man Caleb Brennan was. The stories Martha had told echoed in her mind, a legend in the mountains, fearless, strong, respected, until a grizzly tore the life right out of him. Now he was a broken man who hid from the world, bitter and angry and unwilling to be seen. How was she supposed to be a wife to such a man? The wagon crested a rise at sundown, and Sarah's breath caught. The Brennan Ranch wasn't a simple homestead. It was a fortress carved into the wild. The main lodge sat like a giant in the valley, made of thick log beams and heavy stone. Smoke curled from the chimney, warm and inviting, but intimidating at the same time. Barns and corrals sat behind the house, horses grazing nearby. The land stretched wide and strong, surrounded by towering peaks. This wasn't just a ranch. This was an empire. Sarah felt very small. Martha greeted her at the steps of the big house. "Welcome home," she said. Home. The word stung. Inside, the lodge was warm, lit by lanterns and a roaring fire. A cook named Hannah showed her to a quiet room upstairs, where a simple but comfortable bed waited. Sarah set her bag down, but her hands trembled too much to unpack anything. She didn't sleep that night. The next afternoon, she met him. Sarah was exploring the library when she heard uneven footsteps approaching. A slow, heavy limp. Thump, tap, thump, tap. Her heart pounded. She turned. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair falling around a stern face, gray eyes like cold storm clouds. He leaned heavily on a carved wooden cane. His left leg looked stiff, painful. His expression was guarded, hard, and full of old hurt. This was Caleb Brennan, and he was nothing like she imagined. "You must be Sarah," he said, his deep voice rough as gravel. "Yes," she managed, lifting her chin. "And you must be Caleb." He nodded once. No warmth, no smile. "Nothing welcoming. Martha tells me we are to be married tomorrow," he said. Sarah swallowed. "That's what I was told." Caleb studied her, his eyes sharp and disappointed. "Did you choose this?" he asked quietly. Anger sparked in Sarah's chest. "Did you?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "No, but a crippled man doesn't get many choices." "I suppose this is better than being alone." Sarah's face burned. "My mother is dying," she snapped. "My brother is starving. I didn't choose this either. I'm here because I had no other way to save them." Caleb stared at her, really stared, and something in his expression softened for just a moment. "At least you're honest," he murmured. He turned to leave, but Sarah found herself speaking. "They say you were a great mountain man. She said that you were well respected." He paused, his back to her. His shoulders rose and fell with a heavy breath. "I was," he admitted, "before the grizzly changed everything." His voice cracked just slightly, and Sarah realized he wasn't cold, he was hurting. Deeply. He left the room without another word, the thump of his cane echoing down the hall. That night, Sarah lay awake again, staring out the window at the silent slopes. She didn't know what kind of marriage tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if Caleb wanted her here, or if he blamed her for being part of the arrangement. All she knew was one thing. She was terrified of the life she was walking into, and even more terrified of the man she was about to marry. The morning of the wedding arrived cold and gray, as if the mountains themselves held their breath. Sarah woke before dawn, her stomach tight with dread. Hannah helped her dress in a simple cream gown Martha had given her. It was beautiful, but it felt like wearing someone else's life. Downstairs, the main room had been cleared. Only a few people were present. Martha, Jacob, and two ranch hands who stood quietly off to the side. A traveling preacher waited near the fireplace, his hat held respectfully in his hands. Caleb stood near the window, leaning on his cane. He looked strong and imposing, despite the tense stiffness in his posture. When he turned and saw her, his expression didn't change. But something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe. Or guilt. The ceremony was short. Simple words, simple vows, no kiss. When the preacher announced them husband and wife, Caleb only nodded to her and stepped back, as if afraid to stand too close. And just like that, her life changed forever. Afterward, Caleb excused himself and disappeared into his study. Sarah didn't see him again for the rest of the day. Weeks passed, in cold silence. They lived in the same house but in separate worlds. Sarah ate alone at the dining table. Caleb ate in his study, sometimes not at all. He barely looked at her when they crossed paths in the hallway. He didn't shout. He didn't hurt her. He simply kept his distance, like she was a reminder of everything he'd lost. It stung more than anger ever could. But Sarah refused to let their marriage rot in silence. One morning, she knocked on his study door. "Caleb," she said firmly, "we need to talk." He looked up, surprised. "About what?" "About how we can live in the same house without feeling like ghosts." She stepped inside before losing her nerve. "I don't expect you to love me or even like me, but I need something. Anything. So this doesn't feel like prison." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I didn't ask for this any more than you did." "I know," Sarah said gently. "But we're here now. We can either stay strangers or try to build something. even if it's small. He stared at her for a long moment, wrestling with himself. Then he nodded. Very well, he said quietly. We'll start with supper. Together. Tonight, Sarah let out a breath. Thank you. Their first meal together was awkward. They sat at opposite ends of the long table. The silence felt heavy, but not hopeless. The next night was the same. And the night after. But soon, the silence began to break. Caleb asked about her brother. Sarah asked about the ranch. They spoke cautiously at first, like two people learning a new language. Then, slowly, something shifted. He told her about the cattle, the workers, the lands he could no longer ride across. She told him about growing up in a small cabin, about scraping for coins, about her father's stories of the wilderness. Soon it wasn't just supper, it was evenings by the fire. It was conversations about books in the library. It was stolen glances that lasted just a second too long. And then came the day Sarah found him on the porch, staring at the snow-dusted peaks with longing deep enough to break her heart. Do you miss the mountains? She asked. Caleb didn't hide it. Every day I breathe. Then let's ride, she said quietly. He turned sharply. I can't ride far. We go slow, she insisted. Just a small trail. I won't let anything happen. For a moment, he looked like the old Caleb. Reckless, wild, full of fight. Then he nodded. Tomorrow. The next day changed everything. They rode slowly through the lower trails, the horses, hooves crunching through snow. Caleb moved stiffly at first, fear holding him tight. But the deeper they went, the more the mountains embraced him. His shoulders loosened, his eyes sparked. His voice grew alive as he pointed out animal tracks, slopes, wind patterns. This, he whispered once, this is home. Sarah watched him, realizing that for the first time he looked alive. At the ridge, the world opened wide before them, valleys, pine forests, distant peaks shining under the winter sun. Caleb almost broke. It's been 2 years, he said softly. I thought I'd lost this forever. Sarah touched his arm. You didn't lose it. You just forgot where to look. He turned to her, and the look in his eyes made her heart stop. Not anger, not fear. Something warmer, something new. After that day, everything changed. They rode often, some days short rides, some days longer. Caleb trusted her with his pain, with his fears, with memories of the man he used to be. Sarah trusted him with her doubts, her loneliness, her quiet grief over the life she lost. One night, near Christmas, they sat together by the fire. Outside, snow fell in slow, soft flakes. The house was warm, quiet. Caleb looked at her gently. You saved me, Sarah. She shook her head. You saved yourself. No, he said. You brought me back to the mountains. You brought me back to living. Sarah felt a warmth she had never known spread through her chest. She realized then that something inside her, slowly, steadily, had fallen for this broken, stubborn man. And when he leaned forward and kissed her for the first time, it wasn't forced. It wasn't part of any arrangement. It was real. A spark born in pain and grown in hope. Years passed with love growing stronger than the mountains around them. Tom finished school and became a proud young man. Elizabeth lived long enough to hold her first grandchild. Sarah and Caleb raised 2 children in the high country. The ranch prospered under their shared strength. The valley became a place of laughter, warmth, and healing. Caleb never walked the same again, but he lived fully again, and Sarah, who once believed she'd been traded away, discovered the truth. Her mother hadn't given her away. She'd given her a future, a family, a love that grew from hardship and turned into a bond stronger than any vow spoken by a preacher. Late in life, Sarah and Caleb often rode to the ridge where it all began. They would sit together, watching the valley they built together, listening to the wind sweeping over the peaks. We started with nothing, Sarah once said, leaning into him. Caleb smiled, taking her hand. We started with each other. That was enough. They stayed like that until the sky turned gold, surrounded by the mountains that had shaped them, held them, and witnessed a love born not from choice, but from fate.